I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Three Body Problem director Minkie Spiro. Minkie, first of all, you directed episodes, I think, four, five, and six. And I'm curious, how talk us through why you took on that particular block and what it's like to take the baton from, or so to speak, from Derek Zhang and Andrew Stanton, and then, of course, hand it over to Jeremy Podeswa and expand upon, the vision that has been created by Benioff, Weiss, and Wu.
Big question, but anyway, thank you, Rob, for having me. So I remember when Benioff, Weiss, and Wu approached me about this. I was actually in Australia at the time on another job, and they approached me, and because there weren't scripts at that moment, I said, could I read an outline of the show? So they sent me a very extensive document, and when I finished it, I was like, I'm in. But I'm only in if I get to do the middle block, which is very rare for me because I normally kind of like strive to do pilots or an entire series. But there was something incredibly like captivating and awe-inspiring, and you couldn't not want to do that moment that we all talk about with the ship. So I basically said, I'm in if I can do those episodes. And that's how it all came about. So I was very lucky to be gifted this document to be able to,
Yeah,
scan it and then say, okay.
yeah.
And also the privilege of getting to work with Benioff and Weiss and Wu was just too irresistible. But that coupled with getting to do such a memorable show was enough to have
Yeah,
me
I,
hooked.
I get it because obviously a lot of directors love doing pilots because that's where a lot of the world building happens and you set the tone. But how could you not want to do, I mean, four and six are great episodes, but episode five, I just have to take a breath because it's that damn good. And we're going to talk about it at length, hopefully. But before we do, just a little bit of something a bit more, terms of a lighter tone. How do you feel about the show becoming so successful? It's number one on Netflix. Critics love it. People talking about it. It's worldwide. People are really loving the show.
Well, I'm humbled. You never know when you're making a show if it's going to resonate. But I'm thrilled because it is such a dense piece of IP, and I take my hat off to David, Dan, and Alex for having the bravery to be willing to take on such an important piece of sci-fi material that is so beloved, and who everybody to this day even says it's unadaptable. And I love the idea of a challenge like that at the best of times, but then when you couple that with Benioff and Weiss and Wu, um, and then you think about when you're doing it, it's so bonkers, and you're thinking, is anyone going to get it? There's so much to take in. And, I dedicated a year plus of my life to it. So you sort of hope that it will. So you saying and the critics and statistics showing that it's been such a big hit is such a, it's humbling and it's a relief and it's exciting and I'm known for a lot of things, but I'm not known for VFX. So
Yeah.
that was another reason why I had a pull to it, because I wanted to continue to stop being people able to pigeonhole me. So to be able to do a show that suddenly was so VFX centric um, was great, because it was just like, okay, so Minky can do psychological, she can do period, she can do comedy, but she doesn't do VFX. And then I was
Now she
able to
does.
do that.
Now she
Yeah, that was
absolutely
great.
does.
That was great.
Um, Yeah, look, I even Xixing Liu, the author of the three novels, has said this is unadaptable. I don't know how the hell you guys are going to do it. Benioff and Weiss obviously come with a lot of maybe baggage, and pressure. They created one of the greatest TV shows, in my opinion, ever made. Alexander Wu is extremely articulate, intelligent writer, wrote for True Blood. Um, so they come together, they adapt Xixing Liu's amazing IP. It's successful, but I just a lot of that has to come from the three of them and their leadership. So what did you most value about your collaboration with them?
I mean, I think what's so um inspiring is, in the US system, you have the showrunner um, format. And so as a director, that's what's so important is your relationship within that. And if you've got people like Benioff Wu and Benioff Weiss and Wu who have such intelligence and such integrity, but so wonderful with it. I mean, the cliche of you work in Hollywood and they're all unpleasant people and they're all up their own backsides. That couldn't be further from the truth with Benioff and Weiss and Wu. They are such team players. They're incredibly generous with their time and their thoughts. And you can have these really macro and micro conversations with them. This text, this script is very complicated and complex. So you need to have access to them, but they're also really open-minded. So if you come to them with an unusual thought, there are some scenarios within our industry where the door is closed and you said, no, this is not the way we do it, or it's my way or the highway, or whatever we want to say. With these guys, it was anything but that. They were like, bring it on, Minx. We brought you in because of who you are and what you bring to the table. So just pile it on, just throw it at us and let's discuss. And, as you know, these scripts aren't, it's easy to visually interpret. So when you're able to have these conversations with Benioff and Weiss and Wu, where you can brainstorm, but also show them some storyboard ideas and say, look, this isn't really tangible, but here are some suggestions. It's kind of exciting because it's sort of a blank canvas for all of us to negotiate and play with.
It sounds like to me though, a lot of pressure because you're dealing with seasoned artists. You yourself are also a revered director and a seasoned artist, and you don't want to overstep, particularly with this episode. So let's talk about it. Let's just go there. Spoiler alert, everybody. If you haven't seen Three Body Problem, what are you doing here? Go and watch it and come back. Um, Okay, episode 5, Judgment Day, written by Benioff and Weiss. And by the way, Jovan Adepo told me that we should just refer to them as DAD or Dad. But
Mhm.
I don't know, this kind of sounds a bit strange, so I'm just going to call them Benioff, Weiss, and Wu. But they wrote this episode. You directed it. The most incredible scene on any show this season, by far, is the
Oh, thank
Judgment
you.
Day, the ship going through the. So let's just quickly explain. It's going through the Panama Canal and it's ambushed by Augie's nanofibers, which horizontally slice through the ship and killing everyone on board, including Evans. And I was gobsmacked. Everyone's talking about it, and I still have no idea how on earth you managed to pull that off. So go.
Okay, so let's rewind a second.
Okay.
Um, I was not very good at science at school. Hands up. It was not my forte. So when they send me these scripts and it's quite science-based, and I come from a documentary background. I was a photographer, then became a documentary filmmaker, and then went into fiction. I always start from a place of truth, and that also goes with, performances. So here I am reading this um, um, monumental episode. And let's just also put it into context. Judgment Day is just one of three massive set pieces in this
Correct.
episode,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so every time you think, "Yay, I've nailed that bit of the script," I know exactly how I'm going to break it down and visualize it. It's like, no, 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 hold on a minute. Now you've got the Sophon story within the game. Yay, I've managed to crack that. And no, no, no. And then you've got all the bugs. We are bugs. So it's just like
Yeah.
you're literally, you know, but it's all brilliant. I'm very happy. So I get this script, and we're back to me not being very scientific and thinking, okay, I really need to sit down with our um, physicist advisor, who's this wonderful guy, Matt from Cambridge University, because I wanted to understand, although this nanofiber doesn't exist. How, if it were to exist, how would it function? So I had countless meetings prior to even doing big meetings with HODs, Benioff, Weiss, and Wu. I wanted to be able to come back to them with a legitimate um, physical way in which these nanofibers would work and how they would be um, put onto these
Yeah.
posts that were under the water that would have to rise once the last cruise ship had gone through the Panama Canal. And then, because if anyone came before it, they would get sliced and game over. So all of these technical things needed to be realized. So I remember I had this water bottle in my office, and Matt and I were sitting opposite each other. We were like scratching our heads literally. And then we got a ball of string and we started to roll it around my water bottle. And then we got his water bottle, and it was during COVID. So we were like, 6 feet apart. But so he had one water bottle, I had another. And we started rolling it and how it could be designed. And then I took videos of it, and I went to Deb Riley, I first went to David and Dan and Alex to check that they liked this interpretation of how it could be done. So once I got that tick, off I went to speak to production designer and construction about could they make me a prototype of the nanofiber. Now, this is like way before we get into the slicing, but that's how detailed you have to go into, because you've got to believe this could happen. Because
Yeah.
if believability is taken out of the equation, you're kind of screwed. So there's that element, right? So, and all this has to be done months in advance because of the lead time to building these things. But then there was one thing that sort of concerned me outside of what was on the page, which was how will the audience really understand that when, in the dead of night, they constructed this and we see the daytime setup of this. So I started to work with a storyboard artist in France because what I found working with Benioff, Weiss, and Wu is the best shorthand is visuals. Like we can talk till we're blue in the face, but let's actually start putting visuals down because there's nothing concrete in the script. It's not like you couldn't even say, okay, there's there's dragons and they're flying. We kind of know what a dragon could look like, but nobody knows what nanofiber is and how it could literally be winched out of the so that so
Canal.
I said to Bernie, our incredible exec producer, I was like, I think we need to involve some deep sea divers. She's like, we can't afford it. We can't, this is a whole other day of filming. I said, no, I think there's a smart way that we can do it that could infer that there's all this work going on under inside the water of the canal. So I was adding elements to it, which was kind of already a massive episode. But I felt that if you didn't give a nod to how this was all being constructed, it would become more problematic in the long run for explaining. So there was all that side of it. Then there was, I didn't want this to feel like a cult. I wanted it to feel like a community on this ship, right?
Yeah.
So um, it was important to me. Just as an aside, I was in the tsunami, and so being actually living through a disaster, you really do see how humankind deals with the fright or flight or and I wanted to make sure that I was honoring a disaster on every level, whether it be from our like Wade's perspective or Oggie's perspective, or indeed the people on the ship. I didn't want them to feel like oh, they're a cult, we don't give a monkeys
Yeah.
about what happens to them.
They were
You know,
kids.
exactly. So I added the kids into that equation. They didn't, it wasn't in the script, but I was like, we have to look at the world in that the Santi had created, how they'd managed to draw these people in that were just normal human beings that really believed in a better future. So there was all these added layers that I started to bring into the equation. Like, so we built a canteen and we built a tea section so that I could get these moments of normality. and the calm before the storm. Of course, I would never in a million years ever want or feel the need to seeing kids being
No,
spliced. But
that's all.
the
Yeah.
fact that, yeah, it's much more horrific. But I needed to sow that seed. So I needed to create these moments of, first of all, in episode 4, when Jonathan Pryce is talking to a little French girl about the Santé. So you're setting it all up so that when the demise happens, you remember all these people and all these kids that are on the ship. So you have the canteen scene, you have the kids in the basketball court watching the helicopter being spliced, and you just know what's about to come. So I added that to the script that was already burgeoning and overflowing with demands. But then you have to think about the logistics. What is the floor? Sorry, I'm really going into the micro now,
I
but
know,
what is
I'm worried we're going to run out of time, but yes, go ahead.
I
We'll finish
just
this up
need to
quickly.
say that you have to think about the journey that Jonathan takes from where he first realizes to getting the hard drive. So you have to think about the floor plan, and that office with the hard drive has to be at the back end of the ship so that he's got enough time to outsmart. But then you have to think about he's in his latter years, he's
Yeah.
60s plus, so he's not going to be a sprinter. And that's a whole other story of what happens on the day of the shoot of Jonathan running. But so now you have to think about the logistics of he's got to get from A to B, but he can't be outrun by the nanofibers before we get to. Anyway, I'm sorry, I'm going into such detail,
No,
but that is actually how you have to break down a script like
a
this in
script
order
like that.
to make it work.
Yeah.
And so I got the SFX department to build these LED strip lights that we could change the timing so that we could see what would the speed be? Could I outrun the nanofibers, and how quickly could things drop? And it was important to me that we didn't just lean into VFX, that we had SFX in camera stuff so that the audience, that you trick the eye into not knowing what's post-production and what's in camera. So we did a hell of a lot of in camera, which meant that it was something like 50 minutes resets every time because everything was either on magnets or pulleys or strings. We went back to basics of literally having SFX guys with a rope pulling tables apart in camera. It wasn't all high
It wasn't
tech, but it
CG. That
no,
that going back to old school SFX is so valuable because it's just better in many
yeah,
ways. But that's
yeah.
my opinion. Okay, we're running out of time, but I really need to talk about not only did you have that, as you foreshadowed, the end the end of the episode's amazing because all electronic devices around the world just start up with this "you are bugs," and I was like, oh. But we don't really have time to talk about that. What I want to talk about more is you also have this huge info dump, which could have been so good, could have gone really pear-shaped when Wade and Jin are in the VR game and they get the information from the liaison about the Sophons. Were you concerned about that part of the episode and making sure that it was entertaining and that we understood what the hell was going on?
Oh yeah, I mean it was that had countless meetings, and again back to storyboards because it's so abstract. There is nothing to hold on to. What is a sophon? Okay, what is a proson? How do we visualize? And it is quite a long sequence. So how do we captivate the audience? Also for for Jess and Liam to be able to get performances out of them that were interesting, but they were literally looking at blue walls. I
Yeah.
needed to come up with what is it they would be seeing unfold so that I could get a decent reaction from them in order to justify what we would be putting in post. And it really was um, a labor of love is the best way of putting it because you're absolutely right. You're doing like 3 pages of info dump, and it was our biggest worry and concern is how do we sustain interest in the audience when this is such an abstract thing? But if we can get that right, then it's a home run after that in terms of taking the audience on this journey to the end of the season,
Yeah.
which is brilliant. So yeah, and then having to take over Piccadilly Circus in order to get those memorable shots is another feat in itself of 3 months of work from the location manager to just sign off on all the council and the police and the London transport to get access to the tube station and the video whatever it's called, jumbotron, yeah, to get you our bugs. But I was blessed because I had an amazing cast,
Yeah.
who gave me such trust. They handed the baton over and just said, just we're in your arm, we're in your hands, Minx. You just do what you got to do. We're with you. And then I had incredible support from Benioff, Weiss, and Wu, who were aware of how massive an undertaking this block was. So we're constantly available for ideas. And, I went from massive to simple. Like when I did the Jonathan Pryce moment where he's talking about fairy tales and Red Riding Hood, I just wanted simplicity there. I just wanted, and I remember talking to David and Dan saying, I'm just going to do this insider shot. And they're like, not quite sure what you're talking about. I'm like, just trust me on this one. I just want a slow wrap around. I want to be able to just sit with it as if we are um, Jonathan Pryce and listen to this story. And I've got nothing to cut to anyway, other than a static bloody
Radio.
speaker. So,
Yeah.
but I was lucky because the glasses and being a photographer at one stage in my life, knowing the abilities with focal planes and how I can play with it
Yeah.
allowed me to just have the added bonus of his glasses.
That's a
But yeah,
great shot. And of course, having someone of the caliber of Jonathan Pryce,
oh,
every little eye twitch. I mean, that scene is so chilling, and it's just him talking to a radio, interacting with a radio thing, and I was blown away by that as well. Minky, I wish we had more time because this episode to me is on the same level as like the Red Wedding, the third
oh.
episode of The Last of Us. It's the episode of the season, and you deserve all the accolades that you're getting for it. Thank you for your time today. We really
Well,
appreciate
it was a
it.
team effort, but thank you.